Hey guys, today we're going to be taking a look at Palworld using the RTX 5090. We're using the MSI Gaming X Trio version of the card, so it is one of those overclock models, has 32 gigabytes of video memory. We're playing on the latest NVIDIA drivers and pairing with the 9800X 3D as well as 64 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. Now, I am well aware that Palworld is a game that at its launch was very popular, and since then has really fallen off a cliff when it comes to its popularity. Right now, there's only 27,000 players in-game, a far cry from the peak being over 2 million concurrent players. But to be honest, it is a game that I have been revisiting lately, and since we're kind of in between releases and especially in between betas for Battlefield right now, I figured it'd be a good time just jump in, see what the performance is like on the highest end hardware at the time. Let's jump in. And I should mention, we are also going to be taking a look at the DLSS model that comes in the game. And then, if possible, I'll use DLSS Swapper here to swap over to a more up-to-date version. So you can see, we're on DLSS 3.1.3. So we are going to try our best to turn this over into a more modern model. So to begin with here, we'll start on the high preset, full screen 1080p with no max FPS. We'll set motion blur to off, VSync to off as well. And as far as DLSS, we're just going to leave this at off for now for 1080p. It shouldn't be necessary at 1080p. Now, jumping in here, you can see that immediately we are in a place, at least at 1080p high, where we are certainly CPU bound. Not super surprising, just given the fact that, the card is definitely meant for more than 1080p. We are also in our kind of base camp over here where there's definitely a lot more CPU intensive things happening, so we will try to get away from that area a bit. I will mention that as far as our server goes here, we are running on a private server that I've set up on a separate PC that's just about 5 feet away from me. It's on the same network. It's just a dedicated private server run off of a pretty powerful Unraid server that I have sitting here. It's where I kind of host a lot of the different files and assets and things like that for my video making. So should be a pretty good setup as far as, testing out type performance that we can get here. But you can see, we'll go ahead and begin counting here. Now, this is an Unreal Engine game, so there is definitely a bit of bugginess, and, there are definitely, as you can see immediately, a ton of frame drops already. But obviously, averaging 230, really great experience here. This game, when it came out, it did get a lot of kind of, I don't know if backlash is the right word. I mean, it got a lot of backlash for a lot of different reasons, but the game was not the easiest to run at the time. And obviously, given hindsight, much more powerful hardware than was available at the time of the game's release, we're in a much better spot here, especially at 1080p. So our 5090 is only drawing just over 300 watts, so it's well within, a very safe operating range. We're not pulling the normal 500 watts that you typically see on more demanding games. And here on high settings, the game, of course, looks great. We do have definitely a bit more that we can push. As you can see, we are still not in a position where we are GPU bound. So right around 234 here with, it's possible that it's still rendering in our base. So I'll go ahead and get a little bit further away, maybe even, looks like there's a fast travel point up here. We'll get even further away from our base to see if that performance changes at all. But it does look to be more of a CPU bound scenario here. Though I do want to see if that might change when we get a little bit further away from any of my bases here. So even fast traveling well away from any of the bases that I have seems to still be sitting right around 240. Actually looks like maybe there may be some sort of engine lock at 240. I'm not 100% sure. It would be kind of unusual for this game to have an engine lock. But certainly seems to be some sort of limitation outside of just our actual hardware here. So sitting right around 240, pretty much maxed out. You do see that our GPU utilization is considerably less here, as I keep getting stuck on some different geometry. But yeah, high settings here at 1080p, obviously no issue whatsoever. I am curious to see just how far we can push this though. So we'll leave it on 1080p, but now let's go for the maximum possible settings here. So this is the Epic preset. Go ahead and turn motion blur to off. This is now using, I'm not sure what it was using before, but I don't think it was TSR, which is the options here at least. Doesn't look like there's DLAA. TSR is certainly the most demanding of options, considering the fact that we are playing at native resolution. So we'll go ahead and restart, enable these settings, and see if we're in any different place playing on Epic. And loaded back in here now on Epic. Seems to be a very, very similar situation. Does seem to be that we are locked at 240. Even with VSync off and our max FPS off, 240 is actually the refresh rate of my monitor, so I'm hoping that that is not what's causing the cap here. It is possible. I have seen that behavior before where like within the control panel, there are ways to kind of tweak it. I kind of had to do something similar when I applied that Elden Ring FPS unlock mod to play in like windowed mode, and went to the control panel, the NVIDIA control panel, and changed some settings there. But regardless, obviously incredibly high FPS here, regardless of settings, at 1080p at least. Not super surprising, you know, this is obviously definitely overkill hardware for what we are trying to do here. But definitely, you know, nice to see, you know, 1080p. One of the great things about playing at 1080p is that 1080p is a really great resolution for a lot of different reasons. You know, you do save a lot of money when it comes to the monitor that you get. You get a really competitive, really great 1080p monitor. And if you get even like a 5080, 5070 Ti, a higher class card, you're going to be having pretty much a maxed out experience for a good long while. So here at 1080p, it does seem to be that we are just about maxed out, at least at what I'm seeing here, 240, regardless of settings. So definitely pretty nice. And we'll see how the other resolutions kind of fare. So next up here, we have 1440p. Same settings here, playing at native resolution, using TSR for our anti-aliasing, and at the Epic preset, so everything maxed out here. So this is just same settings we're on before. We're skipping past high unless we do see some sort of issues, but sticking with just the absolute highest possible settings here at Epic. So obviously immediately here, at 1440p max settings, you can see at least starting off here, GPU utilization is certainly higher, but it does seem to be that we are sitting right around that same sort of 240 mark. So doesn't look like either 1080p or 1440p is really going to be taxing our GPU or CPU for that matter either, really. This particular pairing seems to be able to handle what we're throwing at it pretty much without any sort of issue. So definitely nice to see. You know, we are getting some drops, obviously. This despite the fact that this game is early access, it is a pretty well polished early access Unreal Engine game. So the stutters that we are experiencing are actually not super severe as far as just like actually playing the game. I do see some stutters like I've experienced just in, you know, revisiting the game over the past few weeks in some boss battles and loading new areas and things like that. But just general gameplay, like running around, seems to be a pretty smooth experience. You definitely see that our GPU is pulling a bit more wattage now closer to that 500 mark. Kind of varies. You can see it even drops down to 300 at times, now back up to 500, back down, back up. So kind of goes up and down, maybe depending on what exactly you're doing. You see as we kind of like load in some new areas, you see some of those stutters, slight FPS dips, but all in all still holding a really solid average here right around 230 or so. So definitely really solid performance again. And in my opinion, you know, the game is looking great, you know, as far as like just a graphical benchmark. I think, you know, it looks good, but then there are definitely times where it won't look good. I think at scale, just looking at it as a whole, the game is good looking, but obviously a lot of the issues that the game had are still there, being that it is a lot of AI generated assets, a lot of asset farmed assets. So it's not really like a super great experience if you're looking for, you know, just from an artistic direction, especially given the fact that it's basically a rip off of like 4 different really popular games that are all very you know, have a lot of artistic merit. So despite the fact, I have to say I think the game's a ton of fun, so I've been having a good time revisiting it. But yeah, 1440p, essentially same performance here, locked right at 240. So even if we weren't locked at 240, if I were to really do some pretty heavy research and figure out why it's locked at 240, if there was a way or a mod to unlock that, I don't think it would be too far above 240, maybe closer to 300, maybe in some situations, but just looking at our GPU utilization, it does seem to be that, despite the fact that we are only using about 70 to 80%, we're close enough that I don't think it would make a world of difference if we weren't to have that kind of artificial log. Now, what I am definitely seeing is our 1% low is pretty consistent right around 100, which in a competitive game, multiplayer game, you don't love to see, but in a single player type game like this or a cooperative game like this, not nearly as big of a deal. So obviously you're able to explore, throw PAL spheres, everything that you'd need to do to quote unquote compete in this game without any sort of issue whatsoever. So 1440p, just like 1080p, total pass here, maxed out 240 frames pretty solidly with just those occasional dips with whether that's the fact that it's early access or that it's an Unreal game. Kind of hard to tell for sure, but definitely really solid performance here. And last setting here is 4K. So this is 4K max settings at native resolution. So if anything is going to push us below that 240 max FPS, it's going to be this. So we'll hop in and see how this looks. And jumping in immediately, it does seem to be that it is just ever so slightly, just barely dropping us below that 240 mark. So we are now seeing that full, close to 600 watts of power being drawn from our 5090, which is definitely noticeable just in the amount of heat that it's giving off. As you can see, 74 degrees. The cooler on the MSI 5090 is totally fine, especially, the Gaming X Trio. I'm sure any of the other MSI like the Ventus or whatever, they would all perform just fine, but it does spread a lot of heat throughout the room. VRAM, even at 4K, is definitely nothing too concerning here, just sitting right over 8 gigabytes. And despite the fact that we are now using all of our GPU, which sometimes resolves the stuttering issue, you do still see that our 1% lows are pretty much right in the same spot, right around 100, and our average has dipped from that 240 mark to around 210. So we'll load in. Let's find a little bit of a different area and see if it makes any difference. But we'll see if applying some DLSS. See if that kind of fixes anything, or is even worth really experimenting with. Probably not, if I already guessed, just given the fact that it is a single player game. We're already getting such high FPS, but check out a new area and then play with some of those DLSS settings. All right, so now back over at kind of the starting area, and we are certainly seeing even worse performance over here. So this is a pretty big area with a lot of water effects going on, a lot of PALs. This is pretty far away from our base at least, but I know, just from memory, there are some pretty big bosses nearby, so that may be playing a factor, but definitely, I don't know if it's necessarily the place where you would need DLSS. That's probably a stretch, but maybe a place where you might be okay with implementing some DLSS and just getting a little bit better performance. In fact, I actually just defeated this guy earlier. I'm not sure what the respawn rate is. Does look like he's back, actually. So going kind of into this sort of area, you do see our FPS is holding kind of pretty much the same. Definitely pulling all of those 570 watts that our GPU is capable of. So definitely really pushing the 5090 to its max here to just push out these 150 frames or so. So let's start messing with those DLSS settings and see if that improves our experience at all. So we are just going to come in here and let's just go for the quality setting. This does override our anti-aliasing, of course. This is now using DLSS as our anti-aliasing. You can see in the bottom left there, it does now use preset K due to the fact that we did enable that update and DLSS swapper, which is nice to see. That program doesn't always take effect with every game, but you can see we are getting a slight FPS boost where we were at like 150. We're now seeing like 160, 170. It's not major, but at quality on the transform model, a lot of times it's a better anti-aliasing solution anyways than something like TSR. Even though TSR is a pretty good anti-aliasing solution, I do still like the transformer model at quality more. I do think that is a better model. It doesn't seem that there's any option for DLAA to just use the DLSS model as the anti-aliasing solution purely without downscaling or upscaling at all. But regardless, getting much better performance here, and honestly, the picture quality, in my opinion, looks, better anyway. So I would personally rather go for this option. Now let's go ahead and see if engaging an enemy like this, getting some effects, if this drops our FPS at all. You can see we're sitting right around 180, 170, and it does seem that some of these fire effects and things like that does actually drop our FPS slightly, nothing too significant, and it seems to recover pretty quickly, but at least initially coming in does seem to kind of drop us a little bit, though it has recovered, now giving us over 200 FPS, so definitely pretty solid here. As far as the Palsphere effects here, still holding really strong, right around 200 FPS. So yeah, all in all, I mean, as far as like, being able to implement whatever transformer, the transformer model, whatever DLSS model that you want, just with the use of DLSS swapper. Even though this is a multiplayer game, the fact that we are just kind of using my own server in this case, or most people probably, I don't know how popular the the public servers are, but that would be maybe the only case where I might advise against it. But even then, I don't really think that Pocket Pair is too concerned with DLSS models. I think they have definitely more concerning things to worry about than what DLSS model is being injected into a game. But overall here, this does definitely get us into much higher FPS. Now with like a larger scale battle like this, you do start seeing some of that drop a little bit at times, but overall the game still looks incredibly sharp. So definitely would recommend, if you are on a 5090 or any 50 series card or 40 series card for that matter, go ahead, throw on the transform model, as long as you're not playing on official servers, which I imagine most people are not. You're going to get a better looking visual, and you're also going to get likely better performance anyways. So one of those cases where it doesn't really make sense not to do that. And lastly here, let's just crank it all the way down to performance. It doesn't seem like there's a ultra performance mode here. This is now rendering us up from 1080p, and does give our GPU a bit of a break. You can see, despite the fact that it's still showing 99%, the wattage is slightly lower, maybe actually not that much, surprisingly, but one of those things, you're not necessarily going to see like 200 plus FPS like you're seeing here if you're playing at native resolution. And honestly, in my opinion, the game looks just as sharp with that transform model than it does, using TSR at native. So all in all, really solid performance here. Not super surprising. This is not a super demanding game by today's standards. Maybe at the time of release in early 2024, I think is kind of when the game really released, or at least when I began playing it. Seemed to be a lot more difficult to run on, most hardware that was out at that time, which is more like, the 40 series cards were out at that time. So definitely, really happy with the performance here. I've been having a lot of fun revisiting this game, and really no issues with performance whatsoever, aside from just the odd stutter here and there. And obviously, not the best 1% lows, but really that just seems to kind of be the case with a lot of Unreal Engine games. And, a lot of indie games or smaller games like this are definitely utilizing that Unreal Engine. So seems to be something that we're just going to have to kind of get used to. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know this is kind of a weird one, revisiting such a old game, and a game that is not really on a lot of people's radars, but it's a game that I've been playing lately, and just kind of treading water here until some more interesting releases like Metal Gear Delta and the next wave of the Battlefield beta, where I'll be testing out a lot of different cards. So just figured I would hop in and show a game that I've been playing and how it performs. Not that it's should be much surprise to anyone, but Palworld, it's not a demanding game by today's standards, and obviously the 5090 at really any resolution in a game like Palworld is overkill. But in case you're curious, Palworld runs absolutely fantastic on the 5090. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.